Coming up, record monsoon rains across southern Asia and a deadly winter heat wave in the Americas. Extreme weather is increasingly bizarre.
Teve 100 vezes mais chances de ocorrer num contexto de mudança climática, ou seja, se não tivéssemos mudança climática, nós teríamos 100 vezes menos chances dele ocorrer.
Greta Thunberg is convicted and fined again. And is there a connection between religion and climate denial? Why some Roman Catholics doubt the environmental crisis. This is Just 2 Degrees on TRT World.
Em nome do Pai, e do Filho, e do Espírito Santo.
Hurricane Lydia sure did a number on Mexico in October. The climate crisis enhanced Category 2 storm hit the country's western states with maximum sustained winds of 220 kilometers per hour. And as we've come to expect with systems like this, there was torrential rain, rivers overflowed, roofs were swept away, and streets were littered with toppled trees. Reports say that one person was killed during the storm. Lydia didn't last too long, though. It weakened to a tropical storm hours after making landfall. In that part of the world, it is the hurricane season, which generally begins in May and ends in November.
Ahí estuvo bien feo.
¿Y eso?
Le comentaba que enfrente de mi casa hay un jardín que tiene puras palmeras y con el viento pues se movían muy feo, se doblaban demasiado y si se caían ramas, empezaban a volar tejas y cosas.
And record rains in Myanmar turned the lives of people in the southern city of Bago upside down. One resident said it was the first time her house has ever been flooded. Take a look at these pictures. Wading through water like this is not safe. Entire families had no other choice but to find higher ground. 14,000 people have been displaced in Bago. Authorities say about 5,600 were being accommodated in temporary relief shelters. And after that story, it may sound strange to hear that many freshwater ecosystems are actually drying up. On October 16th, that was World Food Day, the World Wildlife Fund released a report entitled The High Cost of Cheap Water. It places a dollar figure on global H2O. Well, Stuart is the WWF's global freshwater lead. He's with us here on Just 2 Degrees. Hi there, Stuart. It's good seeing you. So,
thank you very much.
My first question has got to be, what is the economic value of water? And give us a sense of the crisis the WWF underscores in its study.
Of course. So, I mean, it's worth stating that water, of course, is central to all life on Earth. And in that sense, sustaining societies and economies and our planet's incredible biodiversity, it's priceless. We know that. But because water is so taken for granted, and because it's always assumed that it will be there, we felt it was necessary to put it in terms that people could understand. So we put this value at about $58 trillion a year, which is equivalent to 60% of the global GDP. Now, that may sound absolutely fantastical, but when you realize that we're talking about water that directly goes into our households, that goes into our agriculture, that flows through our turbines to provide energy, that allows us to move transport up and down rivers, that feeds into our industry from mining and manufacturing, as well as the other benefits that it does in absorbing shocks and climate and weather and providing nutrients, then we believe this is an accurate number. And of course, we think these diverse values to ecosystems can be quantified in this way. And of course, there's other values that can't be, such as spiritual or cultural. Nevertheless, unless we start to present water in these terms, we feel that people won't pay attention to that. And to your second point, what gives a sense of the crisis that we think is important to highlight? Well, of course, climate change is making water an almost daily feature in the news. And we know that climate change will impact people, societies, and economies through droughts and floods. That's making an often bad situation worse. And as we know, almost half of the world's population already lives under water scarcity. Food insecurity is increasing as the world faces this erratic weather. We continue to make very slow progress on the 2 billion people without access to safe water and sanitation. And there's other horrible statistics. You know, we have 1.5 million people a year who die from preventable waterborne diseases. So there are lots of crises out there that affect people in very, very different ways. But the point is that we, at the same time that we're dealing with climate change, we are undermining the very resources that we care about. We are destroying wetlands 3 times faster than forest. We've seen an 83% collapse in freshwater biodiversity since 1970. So we can't continue to block and drain and divert and pollute our rivers and our ecosystems. We need a radical rethink on our relationship with water and the systems they come from.
Are there any recommendations to reverse the crisis? If we can't reverse them, any recommendations to adapt?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, I can appreciate that hearing about these environmental stories sometimes seems disempowering. However, water is one of those areas where everybody has a role. Governments have a role in restoring and protecting these vital freshwater ecosystems, investing and committing to restoring 30% of degraded lands and wetlands worldwide by 2030. We believe that there's more that can be done in implementing new water allocation regimes and better pricing incentives. There's water metering, there's leakage improvements that can be made at the urban level. There's water reuse, there's investments. We believe that the private sector has an extremely strong role to play in this. They have been identifying water as one of the top global risks for the last 20 years, where they need to move beyond greenwashing and actually step up and do something. And of course, the finance sector is moving aggressively on adaptation finance, restoring nature-based solutions. Insurance sector desperately needs to invest in freshwater ecosystems to save them billions of dollars. And I think the public has a huge role too, both as consumers and citizens, to raise awareness, obviously to learn more about mindful use of water, and of course supporting conservation efforts and encouraging politicians and businesses to step up.
It sounds as though you've worked out some of these solutions. Hopefully some organizations or governments take heed. Stuart, thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, the UN says between 2,000 and 5,000 litres of water are needed to produce a person's daily food needs in terms of the vegetables and meat we eat. And each of us needs around 50 to 100 litres of water per day to meet our basic drinking, cooking and hygiene needs. But a lot of clean water gets wasted when we wash our hands or take a shower. The residual liquid is called wastewater.
Wastewater refers to the used water from our sinks, showers, toilets, commercial, industrial and agricultural activities, and it contains chemical substances and human waste. There is limited data on wastewater. However, a 2018 UN report estimated that about 80% of global wastewater is discharged without treatment. Additionally, UNICEF has reported that nearly 42% of household wastewater is inadequately treated. Untreated wastewater poses a serious threat to human health, particularly for those who live in packed urban areas. The risk of diseases such as cholera and diarrhea is ever present. An excessive amount of nitrogen and phosphorus in wastewater may also be harmful to the environment.
Well, 2023 is gearing up to be the hottest year on record. And many speculate that behind this is the El Niño effect, which temporarily warms southern Pacific waters and pushes temperatures up worldwide. But the findings of a new study reveal that something else, something within our control, has an even bigger impact.
September saw seasons in the southern hemisphere pass from winter to the start of spring, but many in South America were desperate to cool off.
Agora no começo de setembro, né, ou meados de setembro, tivemos uma forte onda de calor, né, que motivou, ocasionou temperaturas recordes em várias cidades, em particular da região sudeste, centro-oeste e passando aí para outros países da América do Sul.
With temperatures soaring above 40 degrees Celsius in Brazil, the 10 hottest days of the season also scorched Paraguay, Bolivia, and Argentina. And a study recently published by the World Weather Attribution Group with researchers from all over the world points to the cause as mainly man-made.
Então, essa onda de calor que se falou muito, que foi decorrente, poderia ter sido decorrente desse fenômeno El Niño, o estudo mostra justamente ao contrário, que a questão da mudança climática foi muito mais preponderante para trazer esses excessos de temperatura e essa persistência do que o fenômeno El Niño.
The study found that the climate crisis has made extreme heat waves like this 100 times more likely than they would be without its effects, and will continue to increase their length and frequency.
And as expected, not surprised, our findings indicate that human-induced climate change has resulted in the event being between 1.4 to 4.2 degrees Celsius warmer than it would have been if humans had not contributed to global warming through the burning of fossil fuels.
The latest heat wave follows higher temperatures that have driven up forest fires in the Amazon, torrential rains in Chile, cyclones in southern Brazil, and severe drought that threatened Uruguay's drinkable water supply. These disasters have impacted humans and animals alike, but a heat wave in and of itself is a deadly event for which many are unprepared.
E não há, de uma forma integrada, protocolos, né, de enfrentamento para esse tipo de desastre, como existem, por exemplo, para chuvas, para enxurradas, para deslizamentos. Então, a onda de calor ainda é muito negligenciada como desastre, apesar dela matar principalmente um grupo vulnerável, que são idosos, crianças pequenas, pessoas com menos escolaridade, pessoas com menos poder aquisitivo.
And the impact went well beyond South America. The EU's climate monitor dubbed September the hottest on record for the region. This after a summer of heat waves that researchers blame for the deaths of more than 60,000 people in Europe. A clear sign that governments must scramble to adapt their protocols to a warming world. Sarah Balter, Just 2 Degrees.
With spring underway in the southern hemisphere, official forecasts for Chile predict higher than average temperatures, a trend which is expected to extend into the southern summer season, which spans from November to February. Scientists are warning that both the climate crisis and the El Niño effect are driving up extreme heat. Last year, Chile suffered deadly forest fires and has been going through a drought for over a decade.
Tuvimos un año que tuvo mayor lluvia de la que venía siendo normal. Sin embargo, lo que prevalece aquí es la situación estructural de la sequía que nuestro país está enfrentando y que lleva 14 años y que más bien tenemos que pasar a considerarla ya como un elemento estructural de nuestra situación de clima, el resultado del cambio climático, es lo que estamos viviendo.
Desde el año 2015 es donde se incrementa este aumento de la temperatura y sobre todo afectando a la zona centro-sur del país, incluso a la zona austral. De hecho, hay que recordar que este verano en la región centro del país fue el más cálido desde 1950 y es muy probable entonces que esta situación se traslape hacia el próximo verano.
Greta Thunberg, she's been in court quite a few times this year. At her latest visit, she was convicted and fined for public order disobedience. The Swedish court's ruling pertains to Greta's activism in July. She and other protesters blocked a road to the southern port of Malmö without state permission.
I know very well that the laws that we have now are not enough to protect humanity long term from the self-destructive greed that is risking the entire biosphere and our civilization as we know it. And I know what is at stake, so I'm not going to back down from that. We are very good at clever carbon accounting. Only 1/3 of our total emissions are included in our national statistics and our climate targets. Our emissions of greenhouse gases are still increasing. And if you look at the emissions per capita, historic emissions per capita, we are not, definitely not a climate leader. I'm going to continue doing activism, and we'll see what consequences that bring, because the climate crisis is only going to get worse, and then I have a responsibility to act, as we all do in various degrees. But since I can act, I must.
So, plastic stinks. That's the message the environmental group Plastics Rebellion has been sharing. They plan to protest at a plastics industry black tie event at the Royal Lancaster Hotel in the UK. I caught up with them while they were there.
We're here at the very swanky hotel, the Royal Lancaster Hotel, and it's the kind of plastic Oscars in the UK. So that's what we've come to today.
What do you mean by the so-called plastic Oscars?
It's a kind of big pat on the back and awards about, I don't know if what the awards are about, but they they have big speeches and stuff. So it's very black tie and everyone dressed up and dolled up for the night.
So you guys are obviously upset about what's happening inside there, or rather you're upset about what people inside there do. What is your message to them?
Stop making plastics, really. We can't recycle it. It goes into, it's either burnt, poisoning our air, or it goes into landfill, poisoning the earth and the rivers. And we can't really recycle it. Only 9% of plastics has ever been recycled. So we're just poisoning our atmosphere, we're poisoning our land, and we're poisoning ourselves. Now we're finding plastic in our bodies. So, we need to stop producing plastic.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, it's a waste emergency. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, it's a waste emergency.
The Prime Minister Rishi Sunak was recently accused of watering down the country's climate policies. What kind of setback do you think that is to what you're trying to achieve?
I think it's a real huge setback, actually, because sorry, people are singing. I want to join in on. So the government's own advisory committee has recommended that we stop exporting plastic. So they spent years coming to that conclusion, and the government has rejected that because 60% of plastics we send to other countries to let their landfill or being burnt, like including Turkey. We send a lot to lovely Turkey. So we're enjoying your country in one way, but what's the hidden thing is we're destroying it in another. So so that must be the message today. We can't afford plastic any longer.
Bernard, Plastics Rebellion, I just saw on your Twitter page that again you've been criticized for your creativity in terms of protesting. What do you say to people who tell you that you are harming the message by your creativity and your humor that you add to your protest action?
Yeah, well, I think we're part of Plastics Rebellion, so we're renowned for our humor and our dressing up. So we're not blocking anyone today. We are just trying to get our message out there. So I'm not sure how there could be any criticism. What they don't like is us drawing attention to their message. In 2019, at a similar industry conference to this, one of the speakers said, we need to get that picture of plastics filling our oceans out of people's minds. Otherwise, we'll lose our kind of social contract with people. So basically, they're in the kind of plastic greenwashing. So it's not like we're this is what they say, but they don't want us to draw attention to their plastic.
It is a plastic emergency. It's a waste emergency. We're choking in our own waste. These guys know it. They're having a big fancy dinner. There's nothing to celebrate, right?
Yeah, what can we do?
We've talked a lot about how vocal Pope Francis has been about the climate situation and his efforts to convince people to play a role in reducing their own carbon footprint. But is anyone listening? Well, a survey conducted by the Pew Research Center looks at just that. It seems to suggest that the more religious someone is, the less likely he or she believes there is an environmental crisis. Well, John Allen Jr. is back on Just 2 Degrees. He's president of Crux Catholic Media and specializes in the coverage of the Vatican and the Catholic Church. John, thank you once more for your time. So let me point out that the Pew research was done back in 2022 and said 44% of Catholics in the US believe global warming is due to human activity, in line with Pope Francis. 29% say it's due to natural patterns. 13% say there's no solid evidence the planet is getting warmer. I should also point out that the survey was done in the US only, where Pew says Catholic views on the crisis are political, with Democrat supporters expressing more belief in global warming than Republicans. Is climate warming also a political issue where you are?
Sure. Well, I live in Rome, which is, of course, the headquarters of Roman Catholicism. And in a sense, everything here is political, much like in the States. And so I would say, sure, the climate issue is as politically divisive here as it is most other places. Probably the opinion here would be a bit more in favor of strong action to combat climate change than it is in the States. But, I think it is important to say, however, that while Pope Francis certainly is trying to address his climate message to the grassroots, in the first place, we are not the people he's trying to persuade. The people he's actually trying to persuade are those who are going to be gathering later this year, that is late November, early December in Dubai for the COP summit. Just as in 2015, when he brought out his encyclical letter, Laudato Si, on the environment, the first ever papal encyclical devoted entirely to ecological themes, he was speaking then ahead of the Paris climate summit. And in that instance, the Pope was part of that groundswell of opinion that produced strong new limits in Paris, the Paris Climate Change Accords. I think he's hoping to have the same impact here. So while Americans and people elsewhere may be divided, I think that from the Pope's point of view, he is trying to move full steam ahead.
John, for those people who believe that the climate crisis is all about the resources that God gave to us, how do Catholics deal with the issue, for example, the mass production of cows and chickens, etc.? What is Pope Francis' stance on how we can all reduce our carbon footprint?
Well, listen, the Pope is from Argentina, so he is hardly a vegetarian, but he certainly has called upon ordinary people and, for that matter, Catholic institutions, such as dioceses and religious orders and Catholic universities, to do everything they can to try to reduce their carbon footprint and to try to be part of the solution rather than the problem to the climate crisis. I think in general, it is fair to say that no pope before Francis has ever devoted this kind of intense and sustained attention to the environment, to climate change, as Francis. And look, the Catholic Church, it's a bit like an ocean liner. It takes a long time to turn around. And so I don't think it's any surprise that the church at the grassroots is not yet entirely caught up with the Pope's message. But also like an ocean liner, once it does turn around, it is a force to be reckoned with. And I think that is what Pope Francis is pointing towards.
I love your ocean liner metaphor. Always great speaking with you, John. Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, the temperature of the soil crops are grown in is pivotal for agriculture. So researchers from Purdue University have developed a tool designed to help farmers know when to plant certain seeds and help predict when crop-eating pests are most likely to become a nuisance.
Soil temperature is so important when it comes to farming for a number of reasons. And whether it's the spring or the fall, there's always work to do in the ground. And when you need to work with the ground, knowing what the soil temperature will be can be very important. We are talking about planting seeds in the ground. We're talking about applying nitrogen to the fields. We're even talking about understanding when pests may hatch their eggs and come out and affect your crops. All of those have a relationship back to the soil temperature. And if we don't understand the patterns of our soil temperature and what activities we're trying to accomplish, then we're going to have some problems. So when we're thinking about soil temperature, certainly agriculture comes to mind, but there are a lot of other reasons why we would want to understand patterns in our soil temperature. Really anything that requires us to work with the ground is going to benefit by understanding some of those soil temperature patterns. Just like we can use thermometers to measure our air temperature, we can also use special thermometers in the ground to measure our soil temperature. So we have weather stations across the Midwest and across the US that do just that. Unfortunately though, we don't have very many of them. So as important as soil temperature is for farming applications, it's not necessarily something that's very highly available, and the records don't go back very far. So we're always trying to increase the number of locations where we're taking these critical measurements, and we're always trying to increase people's ability to find and use that information.
And before we go, here is footage of some injured turtles in Greece. Volunteers at an animal shelter in Athens are helping the animals recover after fires engulfed nearly 940 square kilometers of forest in the largest blaze ever recorded on European soil in what was the hottest summer on record.